Every year, millions of beekeepers do the same thing. They mix sugar syrup, buy pollen substitute, place it in front of the hive, and wait. Then the following year, they do it again. And the year after that. The modern beekeeping supply industry has built an annual purchasing cycle around the assumption that what bees need cannot be found in the landscape, that it must be manufactured, packaged, and sold. Amish beekeepers have not participated in that cycle since 1800. Their hives stayed full through every season, through June gaps, through August silences, through the dry weeks when modern apiaries go quiet and the supplement bags come out of the shed. Without a single purchased pollen substitute, without a single batch of sugar syrup, without a single feeding station, a single commercial supplement, or a single product from a beekeeping supply catalog. The system they used was not a feeding program. It was a landscape. And the landscape has never needed to be purchased because it was always there, already growing, already flowering, already producing more nectar and pollen per acre than any supplement has ever replicated. On farms that understood which plants to keep, where to put them, and when each one would open. The forage gap that modern beekeeping supplements are sold to fill is real. Colonies do starve during the June dearth. Brood does stall in late winter when pollen is absent. August silences do weaken colonies before the critical winter preparation period. The supplement industry did not invent the problem. It identified a genuine biological need and sold a purchased solution to it. What the supplement industry has never told you is that the same biological need was solved for 2 centuries before commercial pollen substitute existed. Not by manufacturing a product to replace forage, but by managing a landscape to provide it. The Amish understood something that modern beekeeping literature has consistently underemphasized. The supplement does not replace the flower. It replaces the decision to plant the flower. And a decision not to plant a flower, repeated across an entire farming community for a century, creates a landscape that requires supplements, because the supplements are all that remain of what the landscape used to provide automatically. The commercial forage that once grew in every fence row, woodlot edge, and field margin across rural North America did not disappear because farmers stopped wanting it. It disappeared because industrial agriculture standardized field edges, because herbicide programs targeted everything that was not a crop, and because the beekeeping supply industry arrived with a product that made the disappearance economically manageable without requiring anyone to acknowledge what had been lost. Amish farms retained the forage plants because they retained the farming practices that allowed them to survive, not out of sentiment, but because a farm that does not have to purchase colony nutrition is a farm that keeps more of its honey income. The forage system the Amish maintained on their farms was not designed as a beekeeping strategy. It was the byproduct of a farming philosophy that selected against any input that required annual purchasing. The plants that supplied the bees were the same plants that supplied the farm's nitrogen cycle, controlled erosion at field edges, provided wildlife habitat, produced medicinal herbs, and marked property boundaries with living material rather than purchased fence posts. Beekeeping was not separated from the farm's ecology and managed as a distinct enterprise requiring its own input budget. It was integrated into the farm's ecology so completely that the colony's nutritional needs were met as a consequence of how the farm was managed overall, not as a result of a separate purchasing decision made specifically for the bees. This integration is what the modern beekeeping industry cannot sell, and therefore cannot teach. A supplement patty is a product. A farm ecology that provides forage automatically is a system, and systems, once correctly established, do not generate repeat revenue. The Amish forage system began with a single organizing principle. Something must be flowering on this farm at every point between the first warm day of March and the last warm day of October. Not something spectacular. Not something purchased from a specialty supplier. Something, any native or naturalized plant capable of producing accessible nectar or pollen, in bloom at every week of the foraging season, so that no colony on the property ever experienced more than a few days, without a natural forage source within flight range. This principle, applied consistently across 2 centuries, produced farm landscapes that required no supplement because they had no gap. The first forage layer of the Amish system opened before most beekeepers gave their first spring inspection of the year. Native willows, not ornamental willows, but the native shrubby species that grew naturally along every stream, ditch, and low-lying fence line on Amish farms, produced catkins in late February and early March across most of the temperate Midwest and Appalachian regions, often while snow was still visible on north-facing slopes. Willow pollen is extraordinary by almost any nutritional measure relevant to colony health. Approximately 24 to 28% crude protein by dry weight, with an amino acid profile closely matching the requirements of developing bee larvae. A colony that accesses willow pollen in late February or early March can begin brood rearing weeks earlier than a colony without it, entering the primary spring nectar flow with a significantly larger forager population and correspondingly higher honey production potential. The Amish did not maintain willow trees because they understood the protein chemistry of willow pollen, which they did not. They maintained them because they observed, season after season, that colonies near willows consistently built population faster in early spring than colonies without willow access. The observation preceded the science by decades. What the observation told them was precise enough. This plant, near the water, opening before everything else, makes the hives stronger in spring. Keep it. Do not cut it. Do not drain the low ground that allows it to grow. The willow was not planted on most Amish farms. It was retained, protected from the clearing and draining impulse that removed it from neighboring non-Amish properties, simply because the beekeepers who watched their hives carefully enough had learned what willow's early opening meant for colony strength in April and May. The June gap, the 3-week period after spring bloom finishes and before summer wildflowers open, is the most consistently damaging forage absence in temperate North American beekeeping, and it is the period for which supplement sales are most heavily marketed. It is also the period that the Amish closed most decisively, using a single plant that the modern landscaping and agricultural industry has worked hardest to remove from farm landscapes: basswood. The American basswood, linden, is a large native canopy tree that blooms in late June and early July across most of the region where Amish farms are concentrated. Its bloom window of 2 to 3 weeks opens precisely when the spring nectar flow has ended and before the summer wildflower peak begins, exactly the gap where colonies consume their stored reserves and beekeepers reach for supplement bags. A single mature basswood tree in full bloom produces more accessible nectar per day than an acre of cultivated wildflowers. The nectar is highly accessible, open-throated flowers at a convenient depth for the honeybee's proboscis, produced in quantities that allow rapid collection during the brief bloom window. A colony with access to mature basswood during its June bloom can gain multiple pounds per day at peak flow, not only eliminating the need for supplement feeding during the gap period, but actively adding to winter stores during what supplement-dependent apiaries experience as a deficit period. Amish farms maintained basswood trees at field corners, woodlot edges, and along fence lines, not as ornamental plantings, but as infrastructure. Permanent, self-maintaining, requiring no annual input after establishment, and producing more colony value per acre during the critical June gap than any supplement product ever manufactured. The late-season forage that completed the Amish system, the plants that allowed colonies to build winter stores without any fall feeding, were the ones the modern landscape industry has worked hardest to eliminate. Goldenrod and wild aster, the two most important late-season native forage plants in temperate North America, are classified as weeds by every commercial landscaping standard and targeted for removal by virtually every herbicide program applied to farm field edges, roadsides, and property margins. From a colony biology perspective, this classification represents an almost perfectly inverted set of values. Goldenrod blooms in August and September, across precisely the period when a colony must be building the fat stores and winter bee physiology that will determine whether it survives the following January and February. Wild aster follows goldenrod into September and October, extending the late-season forage window into the period when ambient temperatures begin to limit foraging. Both plants provide not only nectar, but pollen, dense, protein-rich pollen that allows the late-season bees to develop the hypopharyngeal gland content required for winter cluster survival. A colony with access to abundant goldenrod and aster in August and September does not need fall feeding because it is doing what it is biologically designed to do: collecting and storing from an abundant natural source. A colony without that access needs fall feeding because the natural source was sprayed, mowed, or cleared in the name of tidiness. The Amish response to goldenrod along a fence line was not to spray it, it was to leave it. That single act of restraint, the decision not to destroy the most valuable late-season forage plant in North America, eliminated the need for fall feeding on every farm that practiced it at zero cost for 200 years. The winter preparation that completed the Amish forage system required no additional purchased input beyond what the landscape had already provided. And this is where the self-sufficiency of the system becomes most clearly visible in comparison with supplement-dependent operations. A colony that has had access to the complete Amish forage calendar, willow protein in early spring, clover and fruit tree nectar through the primary flow, basswood through the June gap, native wildflowers through midsummer, and goldenrod and aster through the late season preparation period, arrives at October with winter stores that are qualitatively different from stores built partly on sugar syrup and pollen substitute. Natural honey built from diverse native nectar sources contains a complex mixture of sugars, enzymes, organic acids, and antimicrobial compounds that commercial sugar syrup does not replicate. Pollen stores built from diverse native sources provide a broader amino acid profile than commercial substitute provides. Winter bees reared on natural pollen develop more robust fat bodies and hypopharyngeal glands than winter bees reared on substitute. None of this means supplement-fed colonies cannot survive winter. Many do. What it means is that the biological margin for error is different, that a colony with complete natural stores enters winter with a different physiological baseline than a supplement-fed colony, and that this difference compounds across multiple seasons on farms where the forage landscape is either consistently complete or consistently absent. The Amish did not understand this in biochemical terms. They understood it in the only terms that matter for a practical farmer. Farms with the right plants had fewer winter losses. Farms without them had more. The solution was not to purchase a better supplement. The solution was to plant, or more precisely, to not remove, the plants that made the supplement unnecessary. The knowledge required to replicate the Amish forage system on any property of any size is not complicated, but it requires a different starting assumption than the one the beekeeping supply industry has built its marketing around. The industry assumes that the landscape around the hive is a fixed variable, that what is growing near your apiary is what is growing there, that changing it requires significant effort and expense, and that the easier solution is to supplement what the landscape fails to provide. The Amish assumption was the opposite. The landscape is a manageable variable. Changing it requires less effort than purchasing supplements annually, and once changed correctly, it eliminates the supplement need permanently. The practical starting point is the same one described for the plant system earlier in this series. Walk the perimeter of your property before you open a catalog. Identify every plant currently flowering across the full season. Map the gaps, the weeks when nothing is open. Then, match each gap to the specific plant best suited to fill it in your region and your soil type, prioritizing species that establish once and sustain themselves indefinitely. For most properties in temperate North America, 4 additions address the majority of forage gaps. A native willow at any wet or low area for late winter protein, basswood or linden at any available field corner or property edge for the June gap, red or white clover seeded into any lawn or pasture area for extended mid-season flow, and goldenrod deliberately retained rather than removed along every fence row and field margin for the critical late-season preparation period. None of these require annual purchasing after establishment. All of them self-maintain. All of them were present on every productive Amish apiary before the supplement industry existed, and all of them remain present on the Amish apiaries that have never needed to open a supplement bag since.